Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Wilson, and I'm the Assistant Vice President for Student Development here at Seattle University. And I'd like to thank you for spending some time with us today as we start the second in our webinar series designed to help families develop a deeper understanding of the SU student experience. And today our topic is financial aid, a very hot topic in comparison to our last webinar. It took a few days to get us up to capacity, whereas when the invitation went out for this particular webinar, it filled up in about an hour and a half. So that's a record for us, and that tells us that we have hit a nerve most definitely. So we want to go ahead and get started. We do want to go ahead and take care of a couple of housekeeping things first. First of all, webinar basics. In order to help prevent some distractions for everybody, we've put everyone on mute. That way we can't hear what's going on in the background, can't hear people coming in and out of your office, or dogs barking in the background or anything like that, just to help everybody stay a little bit more focused with our webinar today. There is a chat function that's available. You can send your questions to everyone or directly to me. I'm the host, Tim Wilson, but I am not the facilitator today. Today's facilitator is our Director of Student Financial Services, Jeff Scofield. Prior to coming to SU, Jeff was the Director of Financial Aid at the University of Hawaii Hilo, and he was the recipient of the Chancellor's Award for Outstanding Professional Staff, which is just a fancy way of saying that Jeff not only really knows his stuff, but he's really good at taking care of the students and their families that are at the university in which he works. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this headset off to Jeff, and we will go ahead and start our session.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session. We're glad you could join us. Financial aid is certainly a subject that's near and dear to me, and that's what I've been doing for a living the last 30 years. And also, I'm now at the point where I have two kids in college, and one of them is a freshman here at Seattle University. So it's a topic that's especially near and dear to me at this time. So what we want to do today is spend a little bit of time talking about really the 2016-17 financial aid process, so you kind of understand how it all works. If you did the process last year, maybe you made your way through successfully, maybe you fumbled along and not sure you did it the best way. So we kind of want to talk through kind of best practices and how things are going to work for your student and you as parents this upcoming year. So here's kind of our topics that we'll walk through today. Hopefully I won't have lulled you into a financial aid coma by the end, and we'll take your questions if you have those, and hopefully we'll have some good information for you today. First topic today is probably the most mundane. It's one of the facts of life for us, and that is students must be making satisfactory academic progress in order to keep getting their financial aid year after year. Certainly for our institutional programs, we require that. It is a federal requirement that we have it for all of the federal aid that we process and disperse. But really, students are here not to be getting financial aid, but to be working towards their degree, and we want to make sure they are making progress towards that degree. So there's some basic regulations that students must meet academic progress in order to keep getting funding to continue their education. First one is the simplest one to understand. It's maintain a 2.0 cumulative GPA, or if their academic program requires one a little higher, that they maintain that basic requirement. Since 2.0 is the GPA required for graduation, we want to make sure that they have that GPA, and when they're all said and done with all the coursework, can actually graduate. Second one is, besides obtaining the proper grade point average, students must be passing sufficient courses to get to that degree at the end. So students must successfully complete 80% of the courses they attempt. So this is done cumulatively. At the end of the spring quarter, we take a look at that and see, are students making progress towards the degree? So the grade point average is important, but students also need to be conscious of the fact that they have to be passing courses. We want to make sure students aren't just, the regulation is there so that students don't just sign up for courses, get financial aid, take the money and run, and don't really get credit. So that's why that's there. And third, typically this isn't an issue for students, but there is a limit to how long you can get financial aid. And so it's 125% of the credits needed. So essentially the student, would have a fifth year to get a 4-year degree done. So those are sort of the basic academic progress requirements. For students who are getting merit-based aid, so for our scholarships that students would have received awarded by our admission office at the time they were admitted, so Sullivan, Presidential, Trustee, Campion, Messina, Xavier, Bannon, our honors scholarships require a higher GPA to continue to receive those, and that is a 3.0 GPA. Again, that's cumulative. We'll look at that at the end of the year. So when students come in as a freshman, they can receive that scholarship for 4 years. And transfer students works a little different, right? If they come in having already completed 2 years, then they have 2 years of eligibility remaining. If they came in transferred after just 1 year, they'd have 3 years remaining. But those, as long as the basic requirements are met, so that's the satisfactory academic progress we just talked about on the prior slide, and for these specific scholarships, the 3.0 GPA, then there's nothing else the student needs to do. We're going to automatically roll those scholarships over. Students will see them on their financial aid award for 16-17. It's sort of a nice, no muss, no fuss, simple process on the merit-based part. When we talk about the other forms of financial aid, however, it's a little more involved. So for aid that was awarded to the student based on need, which would be anything that's federal Pell Grants, student loans, work study, any of those things, then student has to do an additional application. And many of you did that for this year, and that's completing the free application for federal student aid, right, the FAFSA form. You all know, if you've done that before, it's not a simple process. Hang on, we're getting a few of you saying you're not able to see the slide, so we're going to see if we can get that fixed for you.
See slides now.
Can you see the slides now? All right, so I think everybody can see slides. Okay, we're good? All right, so for 2016-17, it is important to do, once again, the free application for federal student aid. So this is an annual event. Every year, students going to be in school. That is a requirement to be considered for all of our aid beyond the merit scholarships. The application should be done online at www.fafsa.gov, and in a second we'll do a screenshot of that so you can see what that looks like. Need to make sure you're doing the correct year. So one of the things that's a little bit confusing this time of year is that students can still be doing a new application for the current school year we're in, the 15-16 school year, as well as starting the application for 16-17. So we want to make sure you get the 16-17 one underway. Our priority date for you to complete the FAFSA is February 1, 2016. And that is an extremely important date for us. So to be fully considered for all the funds that we have available, we really need that FAFSA to be filed by that date. This is a screenshot when you go online of, go to the federal government side, the FAFSA.gov site. For those of you that have never done a FAFSA before, so you didn't do one for 15-16, you would click the button on the left to start a new FAFSA. If you already did a FAFSA, the student already did a FAFSA for 15-16, and now it's time to do the 16-17, and you have your federal student aid ID and login, then the student can just log in with their credentials to start doing the new FAFSA. So once you get to do that login, again, here's where we talk about it's really important to make sure you get on the right year. So if you did a 15-16, so this is an example of a student that did a 15-16, so you can see that tab there. And then it's time to start doing the 16-17, and the message comes up saying, you don't have one yet on file because you're just starting, and click on that button to do the 16-17 FAFSA. Make sure you get Seattle University listed as one of the schools to receive the data. So what happens with FAFSA is you complete it, submit it, it goes to the federal government, and then they do processing. Any school that the student lists on the form, then those schools get all the data. Basically, you listing a school here says release all this financial aid data to the school so they can determine our financial aid eligibility. So if you did a FAFSA last year, all the schools you put down are already there. So if you last year applied at 5 different schools but came to Seattle U, you can now go in and delete those other 4 so those schools don't get that information. Or if you're applying for the first time, you would just go in here. There's a drop-down box. You just click on the Add a School function down towards the middle of the page, and you can type in Seattle University. You can put in our school code, and either one will come up. And then there's a box for you to tell us where you think you're going to be living, if you're going to be living at home with parents, or if the student's going to be living on campus or off campus. So the key thing is to get Seattle University listed so that we, in fact, get the FAFSA data after you've completed that. When you're doing the 2016-17 FAFSA, it's going to be asking for your 2015 family income information. A section both for the student and a section for you parents. So since we have a February 1 filing deadline, we know you don't have all your information put together for 2015. So as you know, if you've done FAFSA before, most of the information you're pulling is right off your federal income tax returns for all that income and tax information that FAFSA requires. We know you don't have all that together before February 1 since you don't have W-2s and other statements probably right till that last minute. So what we encourage you to do is when you're doing your FAFSA this month is use your best estimate of your 2015 income information. So for most families, probably you can pull out your 2014 federal income tax return and kind of use that as a guideline. Did you make a little more, a little less? Key is get your best estimate in on FAFSA and get it submitted by the February 1st, our priority filing date. Then, once you've done that, is get your federal income tax return completed as soon as possible. And once you've done that, we really encourage you to file that return electronically. Because if you file electronically, then IRS gets your data, gets it processed, and gets it up on their computer system so that then you can use a feature that's built into the FAFSA process that allows you to go, while you're in doing the FAFSA, to go out to the IRS data system, retrieve your tax data, and pull it right back into FAFSA. So first time you do the FAFSA, you're going to indicate, yes, we're using estimated information. Then once you have tax information done, you are required to go back out and update your FAFSA data with your actual information. And if you haven't done that by May 1, the federal processor is going to send you a nice email saying, why haven't you done this? You used estimated information. Now's the time for you to go back out and make sure you've updated to the accurate real data. The easiest way to do that update is if you can use that IRS data retrieval process. If you file your tax return electronically, within 2 to 3 weeks, that data will be there on the IRS site, so you can retrieve it from using the FAFSA site. If you file your tax return via paper means, it takes 8 to 11 weeks for it to get out there. And that means we're just delayed getting your final information and make sure it's all update and accurate. So it's use your best estimate of your information by February 1, do tax return as soon as possible, file electronically, wait a few weeks, go back to FAFSA on the web, sign back in, use IRS data retrieval to pull that data down. Who has to do parent data on the FAFSA is always another issue for families. We often have students come in saying, you know, my parents don't claim me on their tax return. Do I still have to do my parents' data? I don't live with my parents. Do I have to give my parent information on the FAFSA? My parents don't support me. Do I have to give information on FAFSA? So in the financial aid world, we have two kinds of students. We have students that are independent, who only give us their information, and we have students who are dependent, who, in addition to their own student information, give us parent information. And how do we know what a student is? Are they dependent or independent? It's the answers to these questions that you see up on your screen determine the student's dependency status. So when the student is in doing their FAFSA, they're going to see this page of questions early on. So the questions are, student, again, this is the student's questions, were you born before January 1st, 1993? In other words, is the student going to be 24 years old during the upcoming school year? So I know parents, many of you thought, if I just got them to 18, I'm done. Well, for federal financial aid purposes, the federal government has a little different take and really think you're responsible to at least give parent information on FAFSA and help with that until the student has gotten their first bachelor's degree or turned 24. Or, as of today, again, this is the day the student is submitting the FAFSA, is the student married? Is the student in the 16-17 school year going to be working on a master's or doctorate degree? Will the student have children of their own? And will those children get more than half of their support from the student? Does the student have other dependents other than child or spouse who live with them and they support? Is the student on active duty? Are they a veteran of the armed forces? Is any time since the student was 13, are both parents deceased? Was the student in foster care or a ward of the court? Or an emancipated minor, which doesn't mean parents that you just kick them out of the house. Emancipated minor is a very long process that would result in going to court and getting a court document that indicates that status. Was the student in legal guardianship? Or any time after July 1 was the student homeless or at risk of being homeless? So if the student answers yes to any one of these questions, then the student is independent and we do not want the parent data on the FAFSA. But if the student answers all no to these questions, then we need parent data on FAFSA. So parents, you notice there's a few questions not here. You notice there's no question that says, did my parents claim me as an exemption for tax purposes, yes or no? For financial aid purposes, whether you claim them or not doesn't matter. That is an IRS thing. Only the IRS cares whether you claim them or don't claim them. For financial aid purposes, it doesn't matter. So you claim them or don't claim them based on what's good for your tax status has no effect on the student's dependency status or whether they have to give parent information on the FAFSA or not. Similarly, you notice there's no question that says, is the student living with their parents? Again, for financial aid purposes, that isn't an issue. It's only these items you see here in these questions. All right, so this screen shows you a little bit more what we were talking about before in terms of using the IRS data retrieval. So this is a screenshot when you get to the parent section of the FAFSA form that says, so for 2015 parents, have you done your tax return yet? So the options, you see there, the one is already completed. The other questions are, we're going to do our tax return, but we haven't yet. So that's when you're estimating. But when you come back out, when you've actually done your tax return, you're going to say already completed. You'll indicate your filing status. And then you'll see some questions that says, can we use the IRS data retrieval tool to get all our accurate information from IRS over here onto the FAFSA? So as long as you haven't done an amended return or a foreign return, or if you've just recently filed, then the data won't be there. But if you've waited that 2-3 weeks, then the data should be there. And you see, right, it's asking, well then, student, tell us the name of the parent that you're trying to retrieve the data for. And typically, parents, if you filed a joint return, it will be listed under whosever name is on the first line of that parental tax return. So to say, yes, we want to do IRS data retrieval, it takes you back out of the FAFSA site over to the IRS site and simply pulls all the information that FAFSA needs right off your income tax information. You don't have to calculate anything. You don't have to guess, am I on the right line? We know it's good, accurate information since it's coming out of the IRS database. You say down towards the bottom right, you can review that information, say, yes, now transfer this data from IRS back to the FAFSA form, and all your income information will be updated, accurate, and complete, which was a good thing for us in financial aid. When you get to the end of the FAFSA form and have actually got to the submission part, parents, if you have more than one student in school, there's a helpful option here that says, is there somebody else in the family who you need to do a FAFSA for? So if you have 2 kids in school, you can do the first FAFSA. When you've submitted that, then it'll give you the option to transfer the parent information over to the second student's FAFSA. So that student would still need to give their own personal information, but this will save you from having to re-enter a whole lot of the parent information to use this, this transfer option at the end of the FAFSA part. Once that is done, the student should see the congratulations, right? You should get this message saying you submitted the FAFSA successfully, a little indication of what's going to happen next, the confirmation number. You'll see as you do FAFSA on the web, there is the opportunity. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. So you can go in and work on it, sign in, work on a few questions, save those. And unfortunately, we've had some families who have said, why aren't you sending us a financial aid award? And we say, well, we never got your FAFSA results. And the parent or student says, well, I know I went in and did it. And often they went in and put all the information in, saved the information, but then didn't go to the final screen to actually submit the information. So you know it's been submitted successfully when you see a screen that looks like this, that says congratulations and the name, right? We've got your information, and they're going to be processing it and sending it to those schools that you listed on the FAFSA to get the FAFSA data. Once you've hit submit and the application is processing, typically federal government in 72 hours has that FAFSA processed. The student will receive an email of those results. If you put in a parent email, parents, you'll get a confirmation email showing the FAFSA has been processed. But at any time, you can log back in here at the FAFSA website and check on the status. So you can see whether it's submitted, waiting processing. The one I've shown you here is like, you've done the FAFSA, it's been submitted, federal government has done the processing, and this is the good sign, right, that things are on their way and you've done things successfully. So you want to monitor that and make sure everything went smoothly. If you didn't do something, there would be a message here saying there was an issue, and then you'd need to follow up and see how to get those resolved. One of the things you're going to be doing when you do FAFSA on the web is the FAFSA does require signatures. So there is a statement at the end of the FAFSA that says everything we're putting on the FAFSA is true and correct, or we're willing to go to prison or pay a $20,000 fine, or both. And the federal government wants both the student's signature and one parent's signature to that statement. You're going to sign that FAFSA with an FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID. You can go out and get that FSA ID now if you don't already have one, so that's all set when you go to do the FAFSA. Some of you, if you filed a FAFSA last year and did it early, you signed the FAFSA using a PIN number, a personal identification number, which was the process the federal government had in place for many years of how to sign the FAFSA. So the student had a PIN number, maybe you as one of the parents had a PIN number, and last spring when you did FAFSAs, those all worked nicely. Somewhere last April, May, the federal government discontinued that PIN usage and went to a new, more secure FSID process. So we're going to take a look at a few slides here, kind of how to walk through that process. And again, you can do the FAFSA ID right as you go doing FAFSA, or if you want to get all that out of the way and make sure everything is created smoothly before you get into actually doing the FAFSA, which I think is a good idea, is to come out here to studentaid.gov/FSAID, and you click on the Create an FSID Now. Again, this has got to be done twice. So the student needs their own FSA ID, and one parent needs an FSA ID. And then it's just simply a matter of creating your username, password, giving email address, right? The PIN process kind of worked differently than what most of us saw on most websites. This process now kind of mirrors what you're used to doing on just about anybody's website of creating a username and ID. During that process, if you already had a PIN number, you can link that PIN to this FSA ID. So if you know that PIN, you can get those linked together. That will save one step. So one of the things you don't really see in this process is after you've submitted this, the federal government, the Department of Education, takes the data you just put in to get your FSID and goes and checks that against the Social Security Administration and make sure you are really you and your name, date of birth, Social Security number all match up. For those of you that already had a PIN, you went through that in the PIN process. So that won't have to happen again because they know your PIN's good. So you can get those two linked together here if you already have the old PIN. If you don't have an old PIN, it'll just skip right through this and you'll get your FSA ID created. Unlike FAFSA, which you do each and every year, FSA ID is a process you do once. So the idea is once you have your ID, you use it each year that you need to come back out and do FAFSA. If you have multiple students who you're doing FAFSA for, well, they need their own. Parents, you only need to do this once. So you would sign each student's FAFSA with your same FSA ID and that login. So you only need to do this once. The idea is you'll keep this, know it from year to year when you do your FAFSA. The students will use, if they get a student loan, will use that same FSA ID over the course of their loan repayment time to log in and check that status. So it's something the student is going to use year after year as well. But never fear when you can't remember it a year from now after you've set one up, right? There is I forgot my username, I forgot my password, and these are easy to reset, just like most systems are and websites you're using. But again, FSA ID, you only need to do the one time. FAFSA, we want you to do every year. About a third of you who do FAFSAs are going to get selected for a process known as verification. And verification means that the schools who receive your information have to verify that the information you put on the FAFSA is indeed correct. So when you get FAFSA results, if you got selected for verification, you will see that. Seattle University will also contact you and tell you, here's what we need to perform verification. So there are several different categories of verification. Some are very simple to complete. Others, if the Department of Education has questions about the data you're doing on the FAFSA, that review might be more complicated. Typically, it's always going to involve verifying your income information that you're putting on FAFSA. The easiest way for us to verify that is for you to have done that IRS data retrieval that we talked about earlier in terms of doing your taxes. So often we are required to verify the income information you put on FAFSA is correct easiest way for us to do that is for you to have gone out and done the IRS data retrieval. We can then see on your new FAFSA results that you did that data retrieval, and we can then use that information and know it's good and accurate. So one of the things you want to watch for as the student gets communication from the Seattle U Student Financial Services Office is if there is requests for verification information. The sooner you can respond to that and get us that information, the better, so we can make sure everything is correct, make sure the award we're giving you is accurate, and know that if you're selected for verification, we are required to complete that before we can disperse any federal, state, need-based aid. We do have to get that done. So typically that's something then we're doing in early midsummer to get that information verified and make sure your award is accurate. But just to be aware, some of you are going to get picked for that process. Some of you we know are going to have some special circumstances. Special circumstances means that the information you put on your FAFSA, so we're asking for your 2015 information, under the assumption that 2016 is going to look pretty similar. That for 2016, we can base your financial aid award on what you had last year, because for most families, situations don't change a lot unless you're the lucky one tomorrow night that wins the $1.3 billion lottery ticket holder. Maybe that's you. Your situation might change a little, but for most families, things typically stay the same. But we know that's not always true. So special circumstances means, something's happened to our situation, our financial situation, that really isn't reflected on the FAFSA. We put down our 2015 information just like it was requested, but then something happens. It's March, you think you've got it all done, completed, but then mom gets laid off, dad's hours get cut, somebody's in a car accident, you have medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance, you have life happen. Those are kinds of things we want you to address to our Student Financial Services Office so we can take a look at those and see if there's any adjustment we can make to your financial aid award. So if you think you have those kinds of situations, we require that you send us a letter and explain what you think those situations are, and give us as much documentation on that as possible. So if you're saying, we have all these medical expenses that aren't reimbursed by insurance, give us some documentation that shows, what you paid out and what isn't being reimbursed, so we can take a look at that. Someone loses a job, right? Typically you would get something from the company with a layoff notice, a date of termination, those sorts of things. You can't give us too much documentation as we look at those kind of situations. So again, if once you've done the FAFSA and you think something else has happened, and that can be any time during the school year that happens, is you need to contact students. Probably their first point of contact would be their financial aid counselor in the Student Financial Services Office, have a discussion with that counselor about what's going on, and then they can help them kind of pull together the information we might need to review that special circumstance situation for us. We can help parents, help you stay informed with what's going on throughout this process if the student gives us permission to do so. So as many as you know, there are an extensive set of privacy regulations that once a student goes to school, to college, their educational record is their record, and no one else has access to that record unless the student grants access to that information. So at Seattle University, we allow students to give permission for others to be involved in seeing that information. So a student can go to what we call student-provided access that allows parents or anyone else really that they want to have access to certain information to be able to view that information and or talk with us on the phone about financial aid and billing information. So again, the student has to initiate this. They go to SU Online, and I'll show you a slide in a second of where they go to do that. And student can provide access both to academic, grade information, as well as financial aid and billing information. And once the student has done that, that's going to trigger a couple things. One, if you call us and want to talk about a situation, we're going to ask you for the passcode that the student created for you, the parent, to discuss that information. Two, when the student does that, they're going to provide an email address for you. And then once the student has done that, a lot of our communications that we send to students, we're going to copy to whoever parent or whoever else the student has given access to. So when we send out a notice saying, student, your financial aid award has been prepared, it's out there for you to see, we can do a copy of that to the parent so you know that it's out there ready to be viewed. Similarly, when we send out billing invoices or change to financial aid notices, right, those things also get copied to parents. So some of you may have just recently gotten an email from Student Financial Services saying it's time to start doing the 2016-17 FAFSA. You got that email information because the student has already gone in and given you that student provided access. So if you got that information, you're all set up and ready to go. If the student hasn't done that yet, they would go to SU Online and they would go down here to the student provided access and they would set up parent or parents to be able to see that information. You then as a parent get an email with the username and set up a password, and then you will have access to the same student provided access. So once you have that, you would go to the Seattle U webpage, click on SU Online up in the top right-hand corner, and then you're going to click on Student Provided Access, and then log in, and you'll be able to see what the student has given you information access to. So this is a good way to help you stay informed of what the process is and kind of how things are moving along, and can help your student navigate through all this, which we know can be quite tedious and cumbersome as you work through the process. But that way, both student and parent can be well informed of what's going on. All right, I'm going to stop talking. If you're still alive and not in a financial aid stupor, you can type in, send us any questions you might have, and we will try to answer those. Well, we were so thorough. You know everything you need to know for 2016-17. So just a few other things, right? Always encourage your student if there's, if they have concerns over their financial aid, they have concern over their student account. We have a whole bunch of people, right, that are willing and able to help students with the process. So every student is assigned a student financial aid counselor. We divide that up by alpha. So all the students got to walk in and say, I'd like to make an appointment to see my financial aid counselor. If they just want to walk in and visit with someone, we have our Redhawk Access Desk, which is in the University Services building, same building as the bookstore. We're down the first floor. They can walk up and just, if they have a quick question, want to check on something, if they need a more in-depth session, they can schedule that appointment with a financial aid counselor. And we are always able to try and assist students through the process. Same parents with you as well. Certainly, if you've got questions after today, which we know many of you will once you get involved in this, start filling out a FAFSA or working through the process, right? Our email address is here as well. You can send those questions. We'll get those directed to whoever can best answer that question for you. And if there's no questions, I'm going to turn this back over to Tim. Thank you all very much.
Well, I want to thank Jeff for coming in and spending some time with us today, walking us through the student financial aid process. And I also want to thank Lori Prince, who's the Director of Parent and Family Engagement here at Seattle University, for yet another fantastic session here today. And I just want to let you know that we will be doing at least one more webinar coming up in the spring, and that will be for the families of students who are interested in possibly studying abroad. That should be facilitated by our Director of Education Abroad, Gina Lapardo. So definitely look forward to that. And if there's nothing else, we will go ahead and conclude our time here together. Again, if you have questions, you can send them to Jeff and his team. Here, they've got their contact information here. We will be putting together a PDF version of the slide deck here and sending that out hopefully today, tomorrow at the latest, as well as a survey to gauge your understanding and interest in just your overall feedback for today's session. And we have recorded this session, so we are hopeful that this will be up on our YouTube channel by the end of the week, and look for an announcement about that to come out via our Facebook channel. If that's all we've got, thank you very much, everyone, and we hope you have a great rest of the week.